Trucker Dump, episode 184. In this week's show, I'm busy being lazy for the holidays, but never fear, returning guest host Steven Gorman talks about the difference between accidents and incidents and how neither should keep you from succeeding in your trucking career. And he backs that up by telling you about his road mishaps and where he is now. In the news segment, Steven talks about the top 10 largest private trucking companies. He'll provide some further evidence to disprove the trucker-driver shortage myth, and he'll cite a survey telling how the public views truckers in 2022. Also, he'll point you to a CB Radio Lingo website so you can study up for the 18 trucker movies you may or may not have forgotten about. As a forewarning, Steven cracks a funny about the 4:30 mark that I left in because honestly it made me bust up laughing, but it may not be appropriate for children. I swear, if this one allowance makes me lose my clean tag on Apple Podcasts, I'm going to give Steven a wedgie that'll have him talking like Michael Jackson for a month. This episode of Trucker Dump is sponsored by Porter Freight Funding. You can learn more at porterfreightfunding.com/truckerdump or give them a call at 205-576-8257. Life is far too short to be chasing customers that won't pay you on time. Let Porter Freight Funding do it for you. All right, Steven, it's all yours.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com, resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Ho, 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 and Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays if you celebrate something different. This is not the first time guest hosting on this podcast. The first time I had the opportunity, I did it on my favorite holiday, and that is Halloween. Hello, my name is Steven. I like to make things. This is usually how I introduce myself over on my TikTok channel. On July 20th of 21, my house burned down. I like to joke that most people blow out a cake when they get home, but unfortunately, I had to blow out my house. And because of the housing market, or because COVID messed up the housing market, I didn't want to buy a really crummy house that was 2 to 3 times worth the actual value, but instead, I bought an industrial building. So currently right now, I live in a movie theater / department store. And the latest video I made is me just putting a door up to separate the movie theater from the department store where I have my small apartment. And yes, spoilers, having a small door up there does make a big difference. If your first thought when you hear my voice is, not this guy again, then welcome back, fellow Trucker Dump listeners. Just remember, poor old Todd McKinn not only has to proofread my draft, and I have horrible grammar, so good luck reading that, but also edit this podcast. Well, you know, this guy gets no breaks. To the new listeners to the podcast, no, I am not the handsome Todd McKinn, the regular host of the Trucker Dump podcast. Hey, everyone knows that occasionally you have to flatter the boss, writer of 2 awesome ebooks that are currently on sale over at AboutTruckDriving.com. Right now, both of the books are 50% off, so it's kind of like buy one, get one free, but remember, it is a limited time deal. The last time I guest hosted on Halloween, my favorite holiday, I talked about the unknown theory and how to find a great truck driving job book is a great resource, because if you don't know the questions to ask, then you don't know how to match yourself with the right company, because it's a lot easier to find a company that matches your requirements than it is to try to match yourself with the company requirements. Like, one time I was interviewing for a job, and they're like, you need to shave every day. And I was like, I don't think my balls can handle that kind of stress. And they're like, no, sir, we meant your face. So it's awkward, you know. It's just better to know ahead of time, and having a resource like this to ask certain questions, it's just a lot better, you know. It's a great resource, and I can't speak more highly of it. Even if you don't want that book, and you just buy Trucking Life, you'll get that book for free because it's 50% off right now. So it's kind of like buy one book, get one free right now. Over the last couple of weeks, there's been feedback about wanting more than just Todd reading the news. And if you're looking for some fluff, some filler, some interesting stories, might I recommend The Trucker Life. It is a book, but it's also an audiobook. And it's 9.25 hours long. It is a great book. And if you want some more fluff, interesting stories, and just how to be a general truck driver in general, I would highly recommend, checking out this book. And might I mention that it is also 50% off. So, I mean, you get the two books for the same price as one. You can't beat those deals. Another way to help support the podcast, if you've already bought the book like me, I bought multiple copies, is to use Todd McCann's affiliate link. It costs you absolutely nothing at all, and you just go ahead and just shop, shop what you're already going to buy, and that will help the podcast. So last month, Todd McCann knew he wasn't going to do the Christmas or New Year's episode. So I pitched him the idea last month about doing a podcast about, failure in trucking. So today I want to talk to you about, it's possible to have a career even though you had an unsafe day. So a little bit about myself, I started driving truck back in 2006 when I got out of the Navy. And I saw a newspaper ad and it said no experience required. And I was like, I have that much experience. So I started my career with Swift. And 16 years later, I have an excellent paying job. And let's face it, with the stories I'm about to tell you, it's like, I think the biggest factor on me landing my dream job is because I live in a small town, in a small area, and just, they ran out of drivers, so they lowered their standards. So as a 16-year truck driving veteran, I have roughly 2 million all general purpose miles. Most people usually say safe miles, but mine are all general purpose miles. Todd McCann wanted me to point out it might be helpful if I define the difference between an accident and an incident. I believe those terms get confusing, especially by newer drivers, and he sent me over an OSHA link that can be found in the show notes. From the OSHA.com website, the difference between an accident and an incident, workplace safety. An accident is a type of incident. Accidents have a narrow definition. What exactly separates an accident from an incident depends on who you ask. But accidents typically implies a much more serious outcome. I've always felt that OSHA was more for the warehouse workers, like other industries, I like to go by what DOT criteria is for a recordable accident. The FMCSA defines a DOT recordable accident as occurred involving a commercial vehicle in interstate or intrastate commerce, in which a vehicle had to be towed from a scene, a fatality occurred, or a person was injured and required immediate medical treatment away from the accident scene. The way I've always remembered this is hurt, nurse, tow, or death. There's a good chance that if your accident or incident was not a DOT reportable accident, a lot of people would consider that just an incident. But then again, it all depends on what your company does, because even though it might not be a reportable accident, they still might keep it as an in-house recordable accident. I would like to start off by saying I'm not a lawyer, and my advice should not be misrepresented as legal advice. Hopefully no one here has to use my advice, but I'm just going to record it just in case. After being in the trucking industry for almost 16 years, the one thing I've noticed is after all the podcasts I listen to and all the, people usually don't like to talk about failure. In my 16 careers, I've had tons of jobs because I'm a habitual job hopper. I've been to many orientation classes. This is a very simplified version of every accident class I have ever been to. The first thing they teach you is don't admit fault for any reason. The second thing they teach you to is protect the company. The third thing is secure evidence. And then fourth, take photos of everything. And then 5, only talk to the police or company lawyers. Every company that I have worked for pretty much had the same goals in mind. Pay as little as possible. Everyone knows it's cheaper to settle than it is to go to court, so let's settle for less. As I said before, I have 2 million miles and they're all general purpose miles. I started driving truck when I was 21. I got to my first accident was in Queens, New York. It was 2007. I was running dedicated for the Swift Target account, and I was supposed to deliver to the Target store, but they didn't have room, so they sent me over to the offsite warehouse. And it was over in Queens, New York, and the offsite warehouse was in the same parking lot as the Home Depot. And as I'm pulling up, I realized that I did not go over far enough to make my right hand turn, and my trailer was never going to clear in the parking lot because it had a giant light pole in the middle of their parking lot. So me being the big dummy I am, instead of getting out and look, that's actually a Smith system term, getting out and look, I just blindly backed up, and if you guessed it, I crunched the car behind me. One of the big reasons why I wanted to discuss my first accident was because it was pretty nerve-wracking. I mean, I was a new driver, I wasn't paying attention, I backed over a car. But I wanted to bring up the fact that, I had to go through a backing class, because if you had a backing accident at that time at Swift, you had to go through a backing class. And the terminal manager looked at me and said, "You should start acting like a senior driver." And I said, "I only have 6 months in." And he says, "Here at Swift, if you have more than 5 months, you're considered a senior driver. Because once you get 6 months in, you can start training other people." So what are the consequences of having an unsafe or unclean driving record? Well, the first is not being able to work for a reputable company. So you'd have to go work for what I like to call fourth chance trucking companies, When you have a rollover, you jackknife, you killed someone, you have like a couple DUIs, you work for the less undesirable trucking companies who, they pick the cheap freight up, and they have they have their trucks that have the 7 different colors. The doors don't match the panels. The hood doesn't match the fairings. Like they just part together they part everything together like a Frankenstein truck. This is a true story. I was in the office at my lowest paying trucking company, and a guy walks in and says, "I got another DUI." And the manager looks over and says, "Okay, I'll see you in 6 months when you can drive again." I mean, I was at a trucking company it was very low paying. It was so low paying that I had to run 2 logbooks. And I was barely surviving, even running 2 logbooks. It was at this company that I got busted for a log violation. I was speeding, and the cop pulled me over for speeding, and then saw, my book, and it didn't add up. So he didn't feel like bringing me to jail at the time, so I got very lucky because in New York, that kind of log violation is automatic misdemeanor. So I'm not sure why he was feeling so generous, but that's when I realized that I had to wake up and find a better paying truck driving job, because there was no chance that I was going to get away with this kind of violation a second time, let alone a speeding ticket on top of that. During the peak of the pandemic, everyone was losing their jobs, and they were just freaking out. I called these people new poor. Luckily for me, I was old poor and was used to not having money. The last company I worked for saw that everyone was giving out bonuses, safety bonuses, COVID bonuses. They decided to cut everyone's pay by 10%. I think the lowest part of my career was actually at this company. Because they cut my pay by 10%, I was looking for another job. And it was at this point where I had a major accident. What happened was, I was delivering to a grocery store, and there was already another driver in the dock. So I was trying to be polite and move over and get out of the way, and I wasn't paying attention, and I curbed 2 tires and I destroyed 2 rims. So the first thing you should do is, if you're ever in a situation, hopefully you're not, but if you're ever in an accident like this was a solo vehicle accident. But the first thing you need to do is take a deep breath. Second thing you need to do is check out the damage. Then the third thing you need to do is contact the company. Because I was pulling for another company, and it wasn't my company's equipment, the first thing I did is I called my boss, and then I had to call the company who owned the equipment. I was on hold with roadside assistance when I noticed that one of the workers was throwing away, some goodies in their organic trash cans. Unlike last podcasts I did was such short notice, I knew about this podcast a month in advance. And even now, this is really hard for me to talk about because this was a very low point in my life. I just recently got back from work after a motorcycle accident where I broke my wrist and I couldn't work for 2 months. I had huge credit card bills. I was back on child support, and I just destroyed 2 tires and 2 rims. So I wasn't even sure if I was going to have a job in the morning. So there I was, eating dumpster pizza, waiting for the repair guy to come. I thought I was going to be stuck at this job for a while I wait for this recent accident to fall off my record. So not only was I worried about getting fired, I was worried about how am I going to find a new truck driving job that it's not going back to, a fourth or fifth chance trucking company where they don't care about the amount of accidents you have as long as you can make a little bit of money today. So luckily I wasn't fired from that job, but I was still looking for another job because they did cut my pay by 10%. And that leads me to right now. Currently, I'm working for my dream job. How did I land my dream job? Simply, I don't believe the new generation want to be truck drivers. I mean, it's long hours. And you compare the amount of hours you actually work versus, like somewhere else, like an OTR driver, if you add up all the hours they actually spend in their truck versus how much money they make, you realize that some truck drivers don't make that much, and they probably could make more if they just went to flip burgers versus some of the lower end paying jobs. And even though I have my dream job, I still had an accident with them. My first day solo after training, I was so worried about proving myself to this company that I didn't stop to really, I wasn't thinking right. So I dropped my trailer at a back haul, and I was, making sure I have everything, get my lock off the trailer, make sure the landing gear's down, how many hours do I have for my next load. I was so worked up that I forgot to disconnect airlines, and they popped off. And so even something that minor, it's not necessarily the end of a career. But the first thing I did is I called my boss and I said, hey, this is what happened. There wasn't any damage, or I think the spring was damaged. He just said, don't worry about it. I'm like, am I going to get fired? And he said, no, it's not a big deal. And then they wrote it up as an issue. They wrote it up as a small issue. So I was able to keep my safety bonus, even though I was just happy to keep a job. The last thing I want to talk about is it is possible for some people to have incidents and accidents, and then depending on the wording the company uses, they can still keep the whole safety miles things. And once again, I revert to almost 2 million all general purpose. And right now, the current company I work for, I'm doing, they say I have 2 years of safe driving with them, but I know on my first day, I messed up. Everyone knows that Murphy was a truck driver. That's why we all live with Murphy's Law, If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. I usually like to point out how me and Todd McCann are different. Like, he is happily married, and I am single. I know Todd McCann's going to say something like, hey, you can't use the Trucker Dump podcast to try to find a new wife. I'm going to be like, not with that attitude. Everything's a dating app now. But how me and Todd are similar, we both don't have a perfect driving record. If you want to know about Todd McCann's funny story about the evil overlord laughing her ass off when he screwed up, it's all in chapter 15 of The Trucker Life. Don't forget, for a limited time only, this ebook is 50% off, and it comes with a free audiobook, which is roughly 9.25 hours long. So it is possible to recover from an unsafe day, even if you have to have a placeholder job for a little bit. I think right now is a golden age of trucking because there is such a huge trucker shortage that the job I'm currently working at right now, instead of raising your pay, they lowered their standards. So if you were in a situation like myself, it does get better. It's such a cliche because it's true. You just hear it so often. For the news, I'm just going to do the biggest news of the year, just a recap of what the big news that happened this year that you might have missed. The first news story is the 100 largest private carriers in North America. And this comes from ttnews.com. I'm only going to do the top 10. Ranked number 1 is PepsiCo, and they're ranked 1 in the previous year. Ranked 2 is Walmart, and they were ranked 3rd last year. Ranked third is Cisco Corp. And then last year they were ranked 2, so I guess Walmart stole their spots. Ranked 3 is US Foods. And then last year they were ranked 5th. Let's see, ranked 5th is Performance Food Group. And then last year they were ranked 7th. And then ranked 6th is, I can't even pronounce this, Helberton Company. They lost a couple rankings because last year they were ranked 4th. And then ranked 7th was Rise Holding. Last year they were ranked 6th. And then ranked 8th is McLean. And then they're still holding at rank 8. Ranked 9 is Tyson Foods. And they were ranked 9 last year. And then ranked 2 is Helena Urge Enterprise. And they were ranked 10 last year as well. The next news story comes from March 24th of 2022. Learn how to talk CB lingo like a trucker. Come on. If you want to read the whole list of all the trucker lingo, the link will be in the show notes. I'm just going to read the ones that I think are the funniest. Okay, I'm going to tell you a side story that has nothing to do with this. It's just purely my own story. So, I started driving truck back in 2006. The internet wasn't really as big, and I wasn't making much money. So, I had a CB radio for almost 3 years. And back in 2006, I drove for almost 3 years without a GPS because I didn't trust them. So back in the days, back in 2006, 2007, 2008, I would actually use a CB radio. I would use a CB radio as a GPS because everyone had them back then. So it was very easy for me to say, you come on the radio, I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this city. And a bunch of times they're like, you're way off. You're not even in the right state. I'm so horrible at directions that when I first started driving truck, I thought every time I was going up a hill, I was going north. I really wish that was a joke. But back in the days, a few times I've been saved by the CB radio. And it's kind of sad that we don't have that culture no more. But a couple of times I would have to stop and get fuel. And, a couple of people pop up and they're like, hey, you're going the wrong direction. That's a dead end. And, so back in the days, CB radios were awesome. Also, back in the days, the way you get fuel is so weird because you had to get 25 gallons here, drive up the road, get 50 gallons, and, drive up and then stop at this location and fuel get topped off. But anyways, back to the news stories. I just wanted to go off about, the CB radio and how they used to be a large part of my life. But let's go back to the news story. So let's just start with the basics. 10 for Roger, it means yes. Then backdoor is behind your truck or someone who's behind you, like the police. And then, next is badass is very cool. And then you got bear equals the cops. Then you have the chicken coop, it's a way station. And then you have the chicken lights, or the extra lights on the trailer or rig. An outdated firm is comic book, which referred to as a driver logbook. Back in the days, they had a paper log. You have Diesel Bear, which is a DOT cop specializing in truck enforcement. If those guys scare me. You see that van? It's like, oh, it's not a good day. You got Evil Knievel, is a cop on a motorcycle. There are a bunch of other examples on here. I'm not going to read the whole entire list, but, CB radios, I kind of miss them. I'm a slip seat driver, so I don't have my own assigned truck. And occasionally I'll get in a truck with someone who has a CB radio, and those things are pretty much dead nowadays. I never really hear much chatter on there. The next story comes from transportdrive.com. It was published back in October 25th, 2022. The industry is short about 78,000 drivers, an improvement from last year's 80,000 estimated gap. The truck driver shortage eased slightly in 2002 after more than 90% of carriers raised pay last year, but the industry still faces a second largest number of vacancies on record. American Trucking Association Chief Economist Bob Costos said Tuesday, The number of unfilled driver jobs slid to nearly 78,000, down about 4% from the record 81,258 in 2021, according to the association projections. To learn more about this story, links in the show notes. But what I pretty much take away from this whole thing is it's not a driver shortage, it's a pay shortage. Because if you increase the pay and the driver shortage goes down, obviously it is a driver pay kind of thing. Our next story is from overdriveonline.com. How does the public view truckers in 2022? The key findings of the policies found: 87% have a favorable impression of the trucking industry, which is up from 67% in 2019, so good job. 97% of Americans believe that the trucking industry plays a very important role in the country's economy, which is the same as in 2019. 72% rate of the industry's safe record as excellent or good, which is nearly the same as 2019 at 70%, so it's up by 2%. 96% of Americans stated that truck drivers are essential to keep the country's economy moving. 85% consider truck drivers to be professional, and 78% of truck drivers have a higher standard for safety than other drivers. So, I mean, those are all good numbers, and I like to see them, Okay, let's end the news on a good note. Over from moviesinsightathome.com, the 18th best trucker movies you forgot about, which, if you're wondering, the movie Big Trouble in Little Chinatown is not on this list, which was a really good trucking movie. So number 1 on their list is Ice Road. Liam Neeson stars in action-packed Netflix thrillers. Team of truckers must make their way across a treacherous frozen terrain to deliver rescue equipment to a group of miners who are trapped underground. Number 2 is Black Dog. An ex-cop, played by Patrick Swayze, is hired to deliver a truckload of unknown goods to earn some extra cash. After he learns that his cargo is actually illegal weapons, he tries to get out of the job but is forced to continue his route in order to save his family's life. Number 3 is Over the Top. A truck driver, played by Sylvester Stallone, takes his son on the road with him on a trip to Arm Wrestling World Championship, but they run into problems with a group of thugs who tries to take the boy away. I think I remember seeing that movie. 4. Breakdown. When a car breaks down on the side of the road during a trip through the Southwest, a couple is plunged into a nightmare after passing trucker comes to their aid. 5. Highballin'. A gang begins to threaten truckers while they're driving on the road by stealing their rigs. But Stuntman works with his truck buddies to stop the gang and save their friends. Number 6 is Breaker Breaker. While a martial arts expert played by Chuck Norris uses his job, a cross-country trucker to search for his missing younger brother. His investigation leads him to a small town controlled by corruption. 7. Snitch. After his son is sentenced to a prison, a trucking company owner works with the police to go undercover to infiltrate a dangerous drug gang in order to get his son a reduced sentence. And number 7, that was played by the Rock was in that movie. And number 8, The Great Smoky Roadblock. Instead of retiring, an aging trucker decides that he wants one more trip in him. With the help of a hitchhiker and a few friends, he goes on the ride of his life in a classic trucking comedy. Number 9, They Drive by Night. After losing his business, a delivery driver takes a new job with a competing trucking company. But when his boss is murdered, he is framed for the crime. 10. Joyride. A group of friends use their CB radios to find a trucker during their cross-country trip, but when the trucker makes contact on the road, they must try to escape when they find out their trucker friend is actually a serial killer. Number 11. Every Which Way But Loose. An easygoing trucker played by Clint Eastwood falls for a bar singer, which leads to him on a chase across the Southwest in his fun trucking movie. 12. Maximum Overdrive. A mysterious comes past by Earth, causing machines everywhere to take on evil minds of their own. When video games and semi-trucks go on a killing spree, it's up to humans to get revenge, and get their planet back. 13. A classic. Smokey and the Bandit. A truck driver agrees to haul an illegal load of beer from Texas to Georgia, but when he picks up a hitchhiker along the way, he attracts the attention of a local sheriff, which results in a high-speed car chase. 14. Trucks. Based on a short story by Stephen King, this trucker movie follows a group of human-like trucks that overall truck stop start killing everything in sight. The townspeople must come up with a way to kill the trucks and save themselves. Number 15, Duel. When a traveling salesman, desperate enough to get his meeting on time, is terrorized by an evil truck, he's forced to fight for his survival while on the road. Number 16, Coast to Coast. This TV movie also makes our list of top 10 truckers after a neurotic woman makes her escape from a mental institution. She hitches a ride from a trucker heading to California. During the trip, they connect and fall in love while on the run from bounty hunters and repo men. Number 7, Trucker. While living a quiet life, long-haul trucker, a woman's world is turned upside down when her estranged son shows up on her front door, forcing her to choose between her life of freedom and her family. I think I remember seeing this one a long, long time ago. And number 18, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Set in a desolate future, this movie follows Mad Max as he joins forces with a group of nuclear holocaust survivors to defend an oil refinery under siege with help of the armored trucks. So that was a list of 18 movies about truck driving, or about trucks at least. I was really surprised that Big Trouble and Little Chinatown wasn't on that list. It is a trucking movie and it's really good. I would highly recommend you checking that one out too. This is my second time guest hosting this podcast. And the first time I was so worried because it was an experiment, it's try to keep it short because, Todd McCann's like, we're not too sure how the people are going to feel about this podcast. You being a guest host, being, inexperienced. And, so the first time it was like 7 minutes long. And then, I tried to stretch it out again. I stretched it as far as I could and got to 20 minutes. But this time, I'm feeling more confident than a Swift driver going 3 days without an accident. And it's fine. I can make that joke because I was a Swift driver at one point. I would really personally invite you to come over and visit our Slack group. I post a lot on there. We have a very engaging group over there. And how does one join the Slack group? Email Todd McCann at truckerdump@gmail.com. It is an invite-only group, but I would highly recommend going over there and checking it out. There is a Trucker Dump Facebook group that you can join. And recently, Trucker Dump has gone over to Reddit. So if you're on Reddit and just look up Trucker Dump, you'll find the page with, on Reddit, they're called subgroups. So you can find the Trucker Dump subgroup over there. I would like to thank Porter Freight Funding for sponsoring this show. That if you ever find yourself with a difficult customer that won't pay, just give Porter Freight Funding a call at 205-576-8257 or go to porterfreightfunding.com/truckerdump to learn more. If you want to submit a Trucker Grub segment, you can email Todd McCann at truckerdump@gmail.com. If you would like to guest host a podcast, you can email Todd McCann at truckerdump@gmail.com and let him know why you would want to guest host a podcast. I'm having trouble internet dating, and I thought that if I did a couple of podcasts that I could, I wouldn't feel as bad when I actually put it on my, online dating profile that I'm a podcaster or a part-time podcaster. So if you would like to podcast, definitely, try it. It's a lot of fun. Like I said before, the first time I did a podcast, I was so nervous. I was worried that it wasn't going to be good enough. And now I'm not focused on how long the podcast is, but I'm more worried about how much fun I'm having with it. Todd McCann gave me roughly 5 weeks to come up with a script, and if you guessed I waited until the last possible minute to do it, then congratulations, you know me pretty well. So right now I'm recording this on the 22nd, and this has to be produced on Christmas, so 2 days, 3 days. I have fast math, but not accurate math. If you would like to watch some of the videos that I make on TikTok, you can find me on TikTok. It's Mr. Hero, but the O is actually a 0. So it's, it's MRHER0, Mr. Hero with a 0. Thank you for listening. And because this is the Christmas episode, I just want to say Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Todd McCann wanted me to point out that I've been to so many onboarding. Only talk to police. Truckerdump@gmail.com.
Steven doesn't know what he's doing.